Some people will applaud you to your face while secretly resenting you, not because of what you did to them, but because of what you stopped allowing. The silence of resentment is more common than you think, and often it comes from those who once claimed to love you the most. Let me be blunt. When you start taking care of yourself, standing tall and no longer offering explanations, some people feel like you're stealing something from them. They can't stand your peace because it echoes the war they're too afraid to face. Today, I want to share 8 reasons why people might secretly resent you and how to understand it not from a place of guilt, but from a place of clarity. The last reason, fair warning, might sting. Because maybe you've also felt like that uncomfortable mirror others refuse to look at. I'm Gabriel. And if you've ever wondered why someone distanced themselves from you without explanation, why certain relationships seem to wither for no clear reason, stay until the end. This video isn't about them. It's about you and what you'll do with that truth. Have you ever looked in the mirror and felt you no longer needed to justify your growth, but it still hurt to be punished for it? That's what happens when you choose to evolve. When you stop begging for love, when you learn to sit in silence without guilt, when your own voice becomes louder than everyone else's. That's the exact moment some people begin to resent you. Not because you hurt them, but because you dared to stop living in their shadow. This is the first point we'll explore today, because you didn't apologize for becoming strong. And this is where many stumble upon the hardest stone: guilt. Because yes, guilt doesn't vanish just because you're right. Sometimes you rise with more dignity than ever, but instead of relief, you're met with cold stares, loaded silences, and unanswered messages. And you wonder if standing tall was a mistake, but it wasn't. The mistake came earlier, when you allowed yourself to be brought to your knees just to stay close. Here's the truth: when you choose to heal, you make people uncomfortable, because your strength exposes the emotional dependency of those who relied on your weakness, as if your sadness gave them power, as if your exhaustion validated their own excuses. The day you stop crying on the inside and start building on the outside, some people simply can't stand that you found in yourself what they never found in themselves. Let me tell you something I once heard at a spiritual retreat. An older woman, one of those who have survived everything and still walk with a steady soul, said through tears, "They don't hate me for what I did. They hate me because I stopped crying for them." That hit me in the chest, because that was everything. Her daughter hadn't spoken to her in months. Her grandson stopped visiting. Her sister accused her of becoming cold. What had she done? She stopped sending messages that went unanswered. She stopped saying yes when every part of her body screamed no. She started praying not for their return, but for peace, even if they never came back. Marcus Aurelius said we shouldn't expect the world to be fair, but we should strive to be fair ourselves. And sometimes, the greatest act of fairness is toward yourself, toward your story, toward the body that got up time and again to cook, to comfort, to carry. Who said you had to ask permission to stop being an emotional slave to those who never knew how to care for you? But of course, that comes at a cost. You'll pay for it with distance, with sarcasm, with being forgotten. They'll say you've changed as if that were a betrayal. And maybe it was, but not to them. It was a betrayal to the version of you that kept silent just to keep the peace. That's who you betrayed. And thank God for that. Because being strong isn't about shouting or controlling. It's about deciding your soul deserves more than the crumbs of conditional affection. It's looking up to the sky and saying, "Lord, give me peace," even if it means losing those who don't know how to live with it. It's living with your back straight and your heart quiet, even if it causes some people to leave without saying goodbye. You don't have to apologize for that. Not today, not ever. Because if someone resents you for healing, it wasn't love they lost. It was control, and a soul that's awakened will no longer be ruled. This is just the beginning. If this challenged you, wait until you hear the last reason. Because there's a deeper mirror, one many refuse to look into, and that's why they'd rather hate you. The most painful part of becoming strong isn't the loneliness it sometimes leaves behind. It's realizing how many people were only close to you because they benefited from your weakness. It's hard to admit, but it's necessary. And with that, we've reached the second key point of this video. Because you took away their power to manipulate you. A lot of people don't want your well-being. They want your dependency. As long as you're asking for permission, second-guessing yourself, and feeling guilty for saying no, you're easier to control. But the moment you start thinking for yourself, saying enough without explanations, and walking with conviction, that's when the real resistance begins. And it doesn't always come from declared enemies. Often, it comes from your own blood, from those who look at you with disappointment simply because you no longer do what they expect. Epictetus taught that no one can harm you without your consent. That includes emotional blackmail, manipulative affection disguised as love, and the "I just want what's best for you" that really means "I want you to do what works for me." Once you begin to see that clearly, you can't keep acting the same. It's like the curtain lifts and reveals a whole theater you once thought was real. Manipulation doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers. It whispers things like, "You didn't used to be like this. It hurts me that you're pulling away. You must be confused." Or, "If you loved me, you would." And the whisper hurts more than the shout because it makes you question if you're the one in the wrong. But when you look at it honestly, you realize what really bothers them isn't your supposed confusion, it's your clarity. You're no longer swayed by sweet words hiding selfish motives. You no longer trade your peace just to please everyone. And for some, that's unacceptable. In daily life, this shows up in small but persistent ways. A son who only calls when he needs something and gets annoyed that you're no longer always available. A friend who drifts away when you stop being her constant emotional support. A family member who stops inviting you because you no longer bend to their conditions. They don't say anything outright, but they punish you with distance, indifference, and calculated silence. They're waiting for you to fall back into your old role. And if you don't, they start to resent the new version of you, the one they no longer need, but also can't ignore. From a spiritual perspective, this isn't just a relational conflict. It's a battle between light and shadow. When you choose truth, even when it hurts, you bring light. But light unsettles those who prefer to live in the gray. Jesus himself said, "The truth will set you free." But he didn't say it would be easy, or comfortable, or well received. Spiritual freedom means living unchained, owing your identity to no one. And it shows, it radiates, it disturbs. With age, this truth becomes even more urgent. There's no longer time to hold together what can't be held. No more room to live under the weight of other people's expectations. If you keep giving in to manipulation, you'll pay for it with anxiety, insomnia, emptiness, and that dry sadness that doesn't cry, but weighs you down. Your body feels it. Your soul knows it. And deep inside, even if you don't say it, you keep repeating, "This isn't what I want." So what can you do? You don't need to confront people aggressively. Just hold your decision with calm. Say, "I can't," without explaining yourself. Say, "This isn't good for me," without starting a fight. That's true Stoic resistance. It's not about shouting your truth, it's about holding it steady, even when everything around you trembles. And yes, you'll lose some people along the way, but you'll gain something infinitely more valuable: your integrity. That quiet peace that comes when you know no one else controls your emotions, your decisions, or your spirit. So if you've noticed someone has changed toward you since you began to change, don't blame yourself. It's not that you became difficult, it's that you're no longer easy to manipulate. And for many, that's intolerable. If you've already understood that becoming unmanipulable makes you a target for silent resentment, then you're ready for what's next. Because there's a choice even harder than setting boundaries. It's sticking to them, even when it leaves you alone. We've reached the third point of this video, and this is where things start to shift deeply, because you chose your peace over their approval. This kind of choice doesn't get applause. There are no medals or recognition. In fact, it often comes with silence, sideways glances, and judgments disguised as concern. But there comes a time in life when pleasing others is no longer an option. When you've given too much, when your emotional knees are worn from kneeling for love, you learn that nothing is more expensive than sacrificing your peace just to belong. Choosing peace, even when rejection hurts, is a spiritual act. It's declaring that your soul is no longer for sale, that if someone wants to be in your life, it must be with respect, not emotional blackmail. The practical strategy you can start applying today is simple, but it takes courage. Every time you face a decision that affects your peace, ask yourself one question. Am I choosing out of fear or out of truth? That question changes everything. Because if you go to that family gathering just to avoid judgment, you're giving up your peace. If you reply to that guilt-filled message just to avoid conflict, you're betraying your inner voice. But if you choose to stay silent because your soul needs rest, if you choose to walk alone because the company hurts more than solitude, then you're acting from truth. And truth, though uncomfortable, always purifies. I learned this from a woman I met years ago at a community center. Her name was Teresa, a widow, mother of 3, grandmother of 6. She told me, "Gabriel, at my age, I no longer have the energy to live at war with my own conscience. I'd rather be judged for being honest than applauded for a version of me that no longer exists." Teresa stopped going to birthday parties where she was treated like a prop. She stopped giving money out of obligation. She started walking in the mornings and saying no, without excuses. And yes, she lost a few visits. But she gained something immense. She reconnected with God in silence, in stillness, in the dignity of her days. Her peace was worth more than any conditional applause. Stoicism puts it simply, the only thing in your power is your judgment about things. Everything else, other people's opinions, their reactions, social approval, is beyond your control. So living to please is living with a mortgaged soul. Wisdom is planting your feet firmly on the ground and saying, "I choose uncomfortable truth over comfortable lies." If you've made it this far, and these words resonate with you, I invite you to subscribe and hit like. It's more than a digital gesture. It's a way of saying, "I choose to wake up." Tell me which country you're listening from and drop this phrase in the comments. My peace is not for sale. There are still more reflections ahead that might bring you clarity, but the final one will be the hardest and also the most freeing. Stay with me. We're just beginning to go deeper. Once you choose peace over approval, the world doesn't smile at you the same way. Some people drift away, others whisper behind your back, and more than a few will try to make you feel like you're the problem. That's where the most dangerous trap appears, the one disguised as humility or goodwill. The fourth point in this video is exactly that, because you no longer play the victim. Here's the truth. There's a common pattern among those who've spent decades giving everything. They carry unspoken exhaustion that slowly becomes their identity. You get so used to enduring, staying quiet, giving in, that when you finally have the chance to live from a place of truth, you're gripped by the fear of seeming selfish. And so you keep playing the role assigned to you by your family, your neighbors, maybe even your church. The woman who's always available, who never complains, who does it all with a forced smile. But that's not virtue. That's misunderstood self-denial. This mistake is devastating because without realizing it, you end up living a story where you're always in the background. Not because you belong there, but because you were taught to feel guilty for stepping into the spotlight. Victimhood isn't always a conscious posture. Often it's an inherited emotional framework, a belief system that silently repeats, "You'll only be loved if you suffer in silence." And that suffering, once it becomes identity, shuts down every path to transformation. Seneca spoke of the dignity of pain chosen with purpose, but he never glorified pain as a way of life. What many people do unknowingly is hold on to their pain like a shield. After all I did, no one appreciated it. What's the point of changing now if no one notices? At my age, it's too late. Phrases like that are daggers, not from the outside, but from within. They're the voice of resignation dressed up as wisdom, but in truth, they're fear. Fear of starting over without anyone's permission. When you stop playing the victim, you make others uncomfortable, because those still clinging to their roles need you to keep playing yours. But if you stop blaming, if you look forward without resentment, if you choose to build instead of mourn what never was, the whole stage collapses. And that's when they call you cold, distant, disconnected, because you're no longer available for the shared script of suffering. The consequences of staying trapped in that story are brutal. You don't just lose precious years, you disconnect from your real power. You forget you can start something new, that your voice still carries weight, that you don't need permission to change direction. Prolonged victimhood strips you of power, shrinks you, makes you obedient to others' judgment. And yes, a shrunken woman is easier to control, but she's infinitely less alive. God didn't give you this life to beg for attention or to replay the same pain on a loop. He gave it to you so that every day, even in old age, could be a chance for inner redemption. But that redemption only begins when you take off the victim's mask and admit that while you couldn't control what happened to you, you can choose what to do with what remains. So if you feel like no one values you, that your efforts went unseen, that your giving wasn't returned, I want you to look that feeling in the eye, not to dwell in it, but to leave it behind. You are not a victim, you are a woman waking up, and that awakening doesn't need tears, it needs direction, and that's exactly what you're starting to build. At this point in the journey, your soul can no longer tolerate half-truths, and what comes next isn't easy to hear, but it's necessary. We've reached the 5th point of this video, and it touches on something that hurts more than any external criticism, because you dared to be happy without them. There's a kind of resentment that doesn't shout, it watches. You feel it in the cold stares when you smile too much, in the awkward silence when you share something good that happened, in the "I'm happy for you" that sounds more like a sentence than a celebration. So many women experience this without knowing how to name it. They live with the feeling that their well-being bothers others, that their new joy isn't welcome, especially by those who expected to see them broken, regretful, or in need. And when that happens, when you realize your happiness feels like a betrayal to them, it hurts. Not because you need their approval, but because it confirms something you didn't want to accept. That some people only loved you when your pain served their need to feel superior, needed, or indispensable. To keep trying to please those who can't stand your joy is a slow form of self-abandonment. You end up dimming your achievements, minimizing your growth, hiding your changes, just to avoid making anyone uncomfortable. And that's where the trap begins. Because once you get used to shrinking yourself, every step toward freedom feels selfish. You start to self-sabotage without realizing it. You become complicit in their silent contempt. And worst of all, you fall back into relying on the very people who only respected you when you were unhappy. But this can be reversed, not with self-help quotes or empty affirmations, but with one radical decision. Stop justifying your happiness. You don't owe anyone an explanation for smiling again, for traveling solo, for starting a class, for falling in love, for enjoying a coffee alone. You weren't born to pay forever for having the courage to heal, and if your joy creates distance, let them go. But you don't go back. The mindset you need isn't one of revenge. It's one of clarity. Understand that your happiness isn't an offense, it's a testimony. And those who can't celebrate it aren't meant to walk with you in this season. Seneca said, "The greatest freedom is not fearing others' judgment." That includes the kind of judgment that comes wrapped in concern but is rooted in resentment. Because yes, they'll say they're worried about you, that you're not thinking straight, that you should be more careful. But they're not bothered by what you're doing. They're bothered that you're doing it without them, enjoying it without permission, sharing it without guilt. If this hits home, let me be direct. Stop hiding your victories. Don't pray to be liked by everyone. Don't dim the light of what you've accomplished just because someone else can't stand living in the dark. Your happiness is not negotiable. Your joy is not arrogance. It's justice. It's the fruit of everything you've cried through, endured, survived. And if there are those who resent you for it, let them carry that. You've carried enough. It's time to let go and finally live without asking for permission. After everything it took to find your calm again, to dare to be happy without anyone's permission, it would be a waste to shrink yourself just to keep the peace. But there's still one more mistake, one that often goes unnoticed because it hides behind phrases like, "This is just who I am," or "At my age, I'm not changing." This is the sixth point in this video, because you no longer pretend to fit in. I want you to try something right now. Close your eyes, take a deep breath, and picture this scene. You're sitting at a family table. Everyone's talking, sharing opinions, cracking jokes, but you don't say much. Not because you don't have something to share, but because you know that if you speak your truth, if you talk about how you see life now, your deeper faith, your new boundaries, someone will make a joke, change the subject, or look at you like you're being dramatic. So you stay quiet. You smile. You nod. You pretend. That pretending protects you, yes, but it also dims you. Every time you act like it doesn't bother you, like you don't think differently, like what you have is enough, you're choosing to belong to a space where you no longer belong. And over time, that choice adds up. Because a soul that stays silent every day starts to believe it doesn't have the right to speak. And a woman who gets used to fitting in ends up living a life that no longer feels like hers. The hard part about this mistake is that its consequences aren't immediate. They show up slowly. You wake up one day with no energy, you feel irritated and don't know why. The things that used to excite you don't anymore, and you blame your age, your body, the weather. But deep down, you know it's something else. The cost of hiding your truth for too long. Because the soul doesn't age with time. It ages from empty repetition, from pretending everything's fine when deep down you're screaming for change. The saddest part is that many older women resign themselves to living this way. They say, "What's the point now?" while their heart still beats with the desire for something more. But they don't say it. They don't search for it. They don't allow it. And so a year passes, then another, and another. Until one day they realize they spent more time trying to be liked than being true to themselves, and that can't be undone. Because the respect you never asked for, no one will return it later. The only real way forward is to stop pretending, even if it pushes you out of the group. Even if it leaves you alone for a while. Because the solitude of being authentic is worth far more than the company of those who only accept you when you're faking it. You're not at this stage of life to play a role. You're here to say with dignity, "This is who I am," and if that makes you uncomfortable, so be it. But I won't dim myself anymore. The world already has enough masks. It doesn't need yours. It needs your voice, your story, your experience, and your strength. Because a woman who no longer pretends is a woman who's truly beginning to heal. And if that sparks rejection, let it. Because at least now, at last, you're living out loud. After you stop pretending, after you dare to stand in your truth, even if it means breaking away from what was expected, what lies ahead is a mirror not everyone is ready to face. We've reached the 7th point of this video, and here we arrive at the deepest root of the silent resentment others might hold against you. Because you're still standing without asking for permission. At this age, many have already given up. They hide behind excuses, behind, "I can't anymore." What's the point? I've always been this way. But not you. You chose to get up. And that simple act, choosing to stand tall when others chose to crawl for comfort, sparks a deep discomfort. Because your very presence is a reminder that it's still possible to rebuild. And for those who prefer complaining over courage, that's unbearable. You're still standing. Not perfect, not unscarred, but steady. And that unsettles people. Because living upright, without begging for affection, without explaining every decision, is a quiet form of resistance. It reflects back everything they were too afraid to do. And they won't forgive you for it. This is where you need to ask yourself a question. One you can't dodge. Who am I now? Am I the woman afraid to upset others? Or am I the woman who chooses dignity over approval? That question, though simple, defines everything. There is no real transformation without taking full responsibility for the choices you make every day. You can't keep blaming the past, other people, or time already lost. What you do now with what's still in your hands, that's what truly defines you. Owning that truth might hurt, because it means admitting that many times you sabotaged yourself, you hid, you stayed quiet, just to avoid conflict. But there's no more room for that. You weren't born to be a decorative piece in anyone's life. You were born to be a living presence, clear, awake, able to make others uncomfortable simply by standing in your strength and silence. And if that makes people reject you, let it. What you can't afford is to fold again out of fear of being left out. There's something deeply spiritual about this kind of strength. It's the kind of power that comes from the soul when there's nothing left to lose. When you know your worth isn't in what you give or what you do, but in who you are. And you are a woman still standing, even without applause, even in the face of criticism, even when ignored. So today, look at yourself honestly. No sugarcoating, no filters, and recognize that if you've made it this far, it wasn't luck or someone else's help. It's because you made hard choices, because you kept moving forward while others backed down. And that comes at a price. But it also comes with a reward, the inner peace, known only to those who walk tall, even when the world turns its back. If you've made it this far, you already know that standing tall without asking for permission isn't arrogance, it's dignity. But there's still one final route to why some people resent you in silence. We've arrived at the 8th and last point of this video, because you've become a mirror they can't bear to face. Your very existence reminds them of what they haven't done with theirs. Every time you speak with clarity, choose calm over chaos, say no without guilt, or walk alone with your head held high, you're reflecting back what they never dared to build, and they can't tolerate it. Because your clarity highlights their confusion, your independence exposes their dependency, your quiet faith echoes through the emptiness they've tried to cover up for years with noise and distraction. They don't hate you for what you've done, they hate what your actions represent, the mirror you place before them, without even trying. What you can do now is simple, but transformative. Every time you notice someone pulling away or changing their tone because of your growth, don't explain yourself. Don't shrink. Don't waste energy justifying who you've become. Just sit down, breathe, and say to yourself, "This isn't mine, it's theirs." That phrase, repeated like a mantra, breaks the chain of self-deception. You don't have to carry the unresolved pain of others. You weren't born to be the emotional redemption for those who chose to stay broken. But be careful, this only works if you do it consistently. The mindset you need is one of silent persistence. It's not enough to change today and go back to pretending tomorrow. It's not enough to set boundaries once, only to apologize for them later. This path is for the brave, for those who are willing to hold on to truth even when no one claps for it, for those who know that temporary loneliness hurts less than the daily betrayal of staying somewhere you no longer belong. There are no valid excuses, not anymore. There's no time left for passive waiting. If you've truly understood what you've heard today, you know change isn't a lifestyle choice. It's a vital urgency. Either you own who you are now, or you spend the next years trying to fit into a mold that has already broken you too many times. The responsibility for this journey belongs to no one else. Not your children, not your partner, not those who hurt you. It's yours. Completely yours, because only you can decide what to do with the life that remains. And if today you choose to live without lies, without hiding, and without answering to those who hold no moral authority over your soul, then get ready, because many will look at you with suspicion. But that look won't sting anymore, because you'll finally understand they're not really looking at you. They're seeing themselves in the mirror of what they never became. And that, believe me, is their battle, not yours. If you've made it this far, it's not by accident. It's because something inside you is tired of pretending everything is fine, when deep down, you know you owe yourself a life that's truer, freer, more yours. This video wasn't meant to comfort you or offer sweet words. It was meant to show you, without filters, why some people resent you in silence. Not because you did something wrong, but because you dared to stop crawling for love, to stop staying silent out of fear, to stand tall with your head held high. And for many, that's unforgivable. But you're not here to apologize for healing. You're here to decide whether you'll keep living to meet others' expectations or finally start living in your truth, even if that means walking alone for a while. Not everyone makes it to this point. Many stop the video early. Others watch, but don't dare to truly listen. If you're still here, it's because something inside you has already made a choice. You no longer want to be a reflection of what others want to see. You want to be yourself, even if it hurts, even if it shakes things up. So if today's message truly spoke to you, let it be known in the comments. Write the phrase, "I am a Stoic," and tell me which country you're listening from. I want to know who the brave women are, the ones who refuse to hide, to dim themselves, to betray who they are any longer. My name is Gabriel, and this space we call the Stoic Garden wasn't born to entertain or kill time. It was born to walk with women like you on the path to reclaiming your voice, your direction, and your self-respect. Here, we speak from the soul, with a kind of raw honesty that wakes you up and the depth needed to truly transform. Because you weren't born to be a silent witness to your own life. You were born to decide what to do with the time you have left. If something in this message stirred you, subscribe now. Not out of courtesy, but because you know this is the kind of message you need to hear. And share it with someone who's been shrinking inside, who's still pretending out of fear, who needs to hear that it's not too late to become who they really are. Don't share it on a whim. Share it with intention. Because real transformation doesn't come from what's said, it comes from what's sustained. This isn't the end of the conversation. On screen, I've left you with 2 more videos that can help you go even deeper. The Stoic path isn't a one-day thing, it's a way of life. And if you've chosen to wake up, then we'll meet again, with more truth, more clarity, and more reasons to never go back to silence. I'll see you there.